being closed on Sunday was never an issue, non-negotiable. I think last year their average store volume was about $8 million. In terms of how that plays out in the culture, it is a inclusive, open culture. There's no discrimination, but people understand, hey, this is what this business stands for. I mean, the corporate purpose is very clear, to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us and have a positive influence on all that come in contact with Chick-fil-A.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today on the podcast is Steve Robinson, former CMO of Chick-fil-A. Today, Steve is a consultant, author, and speaker on organizational culture design and leadership, brand strategy development, and so much more. Steve was with Chick-fil-A for over 30 years. Wow. And during Steve's tenure, Chick-fil-A grew from 184 stores and $100 million to over 2,100 stores and $6.8 billion, and became one of the most iconic brands of our time. And prior to joining Chick-fil-A, he served as the director of marketing for Six Flags over Georgia theme park in Atlanta. And there's a lot to cover, and I want to take full advantage of my time with Steve. So let's get to it. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Adam. Good to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for working with me as we work through some of the technical issues, which I always say is just par for the course when we set it up here. But I really think that also helps set the stage for a conversation, and it shows about just being patient and letting the process work. So before I even jump in, I got to ask you, what's the story with the painting behind you?
Oh, that is a custom painting by Penley. That was done. That was paid for by my department staff as a going away gift when I retired in 2016. So
I love it. It's gorgeous.
It hangs in a prominent spot here in my office. You bet. And
it makes for a fantastic background for a video podcast. It does. So I want to hit the rewind button, and if I had This Is Your Life theme music. So Steve, take it way back before the chicken, before the amusement parks and the calculators. I'd love to share with my audience where Steve Robinson is from. What was it like growing up in Foley, Alabama?
Foley, Alabama. Well, Foley, Alabama, for those that don't know, is about 10 miles north of Gulf Shores. I didn't go to the beach much. My dad was a entrepreneur. After he finished at Ohio State, he got married. So my mother, he moved to Foley in 1948, and I was born in 1950. And he started down there a hybrid seed corn business.
And what is that for anybody who's not familiar?
You plant that, you raise that corn, and then you plant that corn for livestock feed. And he had a franchise with Funk, F-U-N-K, Major Hybrid Seed Corn Company. So most of my childhood, I grew up working and hanging around the business, working in fields, helping him repair equipment, drying corn, bagging corn. It was a great experience going with him when he went out to try to recruit and hire talent to work in his business. Watch the ups and downs of the economy and the price of grain, etc. So it was a small town, about 5,000 people back then. Foley now is booming because of the beach. A lot of people have moved to
beach town.
Yeah, the beach areas south of town. But it was terrific. I had a great experience there.
So I think there's a couple things to actually unpack there, which I think lay the groundwork for your journey. And when folks think about entrepreneurship, they think about it in the modern sense. But let's talk about it back then, a number of years ago. We're not going to say how many, but people could do the math here. But the non-traditional sense of entrepreneurship, your dad was a for all intents and purposes, a solo business owner, correct, going through the growth, the trials and tribulations. What was one of those lessons, like you look back on it now after your years of experience, that you saw your dad go through, that you said, wow, I didn't even think about it back then, but now I see what my dad did, and I absorbed that lesson and applied it during my career?
Yeah. Well, I learned something that Well, here's the headline. I learned that it's great to have a job. It's better to create jobs. It was fun to see him not only have good years and thrive, but it was fun to see him engage other people, hire other people, give them a fair or better than fair wage, and benefit their families. The other thing I really learned, Adam, and I learned it while I was still there, not after I left, I would travel with him when he'd go out to make sales calls on grain brokers and people who were buying grain. And I learned real early that if you don't sell anything, nothing happens. I mean, you produce all the corn or produce all the widgets you want. But if there's not a market for it, if you're not creating demand for it, if you're not creating a position in the market that warrants you versus somebody else, things aren't too good. and it captured my fascination with the whole field of sales, marketing. He later started a small manufacturing business. I traveled with him when he was doing those sales calls too. And that's where I really started to get fascinated with the whole thing of brand management, which, in the 60s was kind of a new growing phenomenon.
Of course. Did your dad expect you to follow in his footsteps in the family business?
I think he would have liked for me to, but and he and I had a great relationship, and I didn't have an interest in doing a small time business in Foley. Love Foley, but I had dreams and aspirations of getting in marketing and brand management. Quite frankly, long-term dreams of being in Atlanta. Always fascinated by the city. So I'm thinking about companies like Delta and Coke and et cetera. So no, he and I reached an agreement pretty early before I went to college that I would not be coming back to his business.
How'd that sit with him?
It was fine. In fact,
Good.
When I finished my undergraduate degree at Auburn, I needed to borrow money because I decided to go to Northwestern to get a graduate degree. And, he was all in. He co-signed the loan.
I love it.
Helped me do that because if I not borrowed that money, I would have never gone to Northwestern. So, no, he was all in.
That's awesome. So your first job out of school, working for Texas Instruments, and I think you were there for about a year. Did that time fortify your belief that you were going to stay in marketing in this world? What was that first job like coming out of school?
It did.
Expectations versus reality.
Yeah. I had several opportunities coming out of grad school, but most of them were in the Northeast and the Midwest. And no offense to anyone who lives in those areas, but being from the South, I wanted to get back to the South. And I had an opportunity to join Texas Instruments in a brand new group, consumer group they had formed. They called it a semiconductor group, where they were attempting to market for the first time ever for them, business to consumer handheld calculators.
TIs, the TI model.
Yeah, right.
TI-83.
It was the Apple of our day, it was the iPhone of our day. And so I went into that group, and within a year, I got exposed to direct response marketing using magazines and direct mail. Again, you don't sell anything, nothing happens. But culturally, what I discovered was TI was very engineering focused. And they didn't really get the whole idea of building a brand, building a product proposition where you could actually get a premium price for it. And so we're actually moving goods, moving high volumes of calculators. And my responsibility was scientific calculators. So I was marketing to engineers and mathematicians, architects, et cetera. And we're selling them. Well, they start wanting to reduce the price, which in my mind, after coming through graduate school and studying great brands, was counterintuitive. Well, what do you want to do? If you have a great brand, you build its product, its perceived value, and get a premium price. Frustrated me. And I was only there about a year, and the phone rang one night. I'm still at the office, and it was Dan Howells, who was director of marketing for Six Flags Over Texas.
He called you in your office because back then that was probably the only number he had to reach you at. Right? They probably went through the directory, right?
I actually went through his brother because I had gone to grad school with his brother.
There you go. So you
Bob.
had the person. It wasn't just a complete cold
No,
call,
no,
right?
one
Of
cold
course.
call. He found out
Right.
about me through his brother.
I
And he
love
said,
it.
look, I don't know how's it going over there at TI, but I need a sales and promotions manager here at Park. Would you have an interest in talking? So the long of the short story was, I said, you know what? If there's any company that's brand oriented at Six Flags, they were actually very good at it. And I interviewed
Consumer
with them
centric.
for a whole day. And at the end of the day, they offered me the job, and I took it.
Now, back then, was there a concern about, hey, back then it was one of those things where like you don't leave a company after 1 year, or it was people who work at Ford forever or GE. Did that go through your mind at all, or were you like, no, this is a better opportunity? It's more focused on what I envision my career directory going, and you know what, I'm going to do it.
It was the latter. First of all, the people at TI were very gracious. I told them that I wanted to go there, why I wanted to go there, more brand-oriented culture. I felt like I learned something fresh at Six Flags, which I certainly did. And the corporate VP of marketing for Six Flags had a brand background. I saw in him a potential really good mentor. And Dan Howells, who was the director of marketing Six Flags over Texas, had gone through the same program I went through Northwestern. So I liked him, and I had a feeling I'd probably learn something from him. So, no, it wasn't a problem, and I went because I felt like it'd be another step to really learning something. Yes,
that's interesting. So let's talk about that time at Six Flags for a moment. And I could only assume that was a great stepping point in learning about customer centric brand marketing,
yes,
hospitality.
yes,
But I also want to get a sense of, would you learn about leadership and how that laid the groundwork for the future?
yes. Well, at the time, I think Six Flags had 6 or 7 parks, and I got to interface with not only the leaders at the Texas park, and then later the Georgia park, because I got sent to Georgia in 1977. But I also got to interact with leaders in almost all the parks, and I saw the whole dichotomy of leadership style. I saw leaders who were very strategic focused. I saw leaders who, quite frankly, didn't show great value to their people. I saw leaders who were very focused on customer centric data, in informing the brand and making decisions around the brand, which was terrific learning. I saw the whole use of media mix. I saw the use of promotional partners. But I really took away from those 7 years, and the last 4 were in Atlanta, was the dichotomy of different kind of leadership styles. And there were some that were heavy-handed, for example. I didn't like them.
Right. More old school tactics.
There were some, unfortunately, in my 4 years at Six Flags over Georgia, I ended up working for a guy, Spurgeon Richardson, who was not heavy-handed. In fact, was light-handed in the sense that he empowered his team, showed confidence to his team, gave us a lot of room to experiment, innovate. And I got to do some stuff at Six Flags over Georgia, the park I'd never done before. And this is a big operation, 2.8 million people a year visiting.
Yeah.
He gave me the freedom to experiment and do things I'd never done before. Unfortunately, most of them worked. So that was an awesome learning. It was the first of one of those experiences where, you know what, if you attract great talent to your team, and I'm not saying that I was necessarily great talent, but in Spurgeon's mind, if he attracted the team he wanted, he was going to be thoroughly involved in planning, but he's got to give them a lot of room to do the work. And that was a major takeaway from Six Flags. Plus the whole cultural context of developing a brand that is customer centric, that's trying to respond to the customer, keep the brand fresh, relevant, etc.
Steve, what was one of those hard lessons learned the hard way during your time at Six Flags? I mean, let's talk about mistakes, because I don't think we talk about mistakes enough, and how we learn and grow from them.
Well, it's interesting. I had an experience with a couple of promotions at Six Flags. They were discount promotions. One was with Coke. I forget what the other one was, but they were discount ticket offers. And quite frankly, they worked too well. They generated a lot of traffic, but they actually hurt our cash flow. And ironically, in my second year at Chick-fil-A, if you recall from my book, I had a similar experience with a promotion that followed all the norms of fast food marketing with discounts, coupons, and newspapers and direct mail. And it worked too well, and it went over
And worked
budget.
too well.
They worked too well, and it went over budget by $2 million, which back then was
Whoops.
a lot of money. So interesting how apparently I'm a slow learner. In both of those organizations, I learned this whole idea of discounting and couponing. Number one, you can't control it. It can get out of hand. Number two, you create a customer dependency upon it. And related to that, you actually undermine the perceived value of your brand. Must not be worth full price.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that experience, Six Flags, and we come back to the park, I went to Spurgeon and I said, look, I want to see if we can't develop a hospitality experience, in-park experiences, and a communications campaign that positions the park as being worth full price. Short of it is we did develop a hospitality strategy. Spurgeon fully embraced it. He got behind it. We started putting more events in the park that didn't demand, but made you want to pay concerts.
Right. The value,
added value, people paying the price. And then we developed an advertising campaign, which actually became so popular, other Six Flags parks picked it up. It was called Hug Your Kids the Six Flags Way. And it was all about the emotional bond building experience of going to Six Flags with your kids and your family. And our percentage of full price within a year shifted substantially up. We became less dependent on discounting, couponing, and I carried that, even though I made that mistake in 1982 at Chick-fil-A. That experience, I hearken back to that experience after the mistake at Chick-fil-A. Yeah. And I said,
that is a tremendous.
I am not going to be a part of discounting and couponing the Chick-fil-A product and the brand. We're not going to market this business like everybody else in the fast food business. And that was a major turning point in the business.
Wow. Masterclass right here, folks, for anyone listening. So let's talk about that transition to Chick-fil-A. How did they come knocking? The cow huff was knocking on the door?
I have to say this part of the story is very personal. Our children were involved in a Christian school, and we had a major building program, and I was chairman of the building program. Now, I'm only 28 or 29, and don't ask me why our pastor asked me to do it, but I was. And Adam, quite frankly, it was kind of a God thing because I actually was not a very generous person. I had pretty tight hands when it came to money. And I'll abbreviate the story because it spread over several weeks. But I came across the passage in Malachi 3, 8 through 12, where God was challenging the Israelites, you're robbing from me. And Malachi said, hey, how are we robbing you? And he said, you're robbing me in tithes and offerings. And he said, I want you to test me in this because the actual promise I have for you is if you'll quit doing that, if you'll honor tithes and offerings, I'll bless you beyond your wildest imagination. Now, everybody have hot points in their spiritual walk, but that was one for me. I got convicted about that. We actually changed our pledge. And I'm telling you this because after we turned in a new pledge where, quite frankly, I knew unless God did something, we weren't going to be able to do it. 2 days after that is when Jimmy Collins, who was the COO for Chick-fil-A, calls me. He said, would you like to talk to us? Because we're trying to build a marketing department and we need a marketing director. Now, it wasn't until months later I told him about that personal experience. And so my reaction was, sure, I'd love to talk because I'd already met them. I knew a lot of them. We tried to convince them to build a Chick-fil-A unit in the park. And that didn't work out. But I'd gotten to know the business and some of the key personalities. And like I said earlier, I interviewed with Six Flags for one day and got the job. I thought, you know what, 2 or 3 days, if nothing else, I'm going to learn something.
And network and meet some folks and understand the business. Yeah.
And here they are, private business culture I like. I've been in PI and Six Flags. I've been in public companies, and let's do it. So I start the conversations with them in August of 1980, Adam. I'll jump forward. It's now December. I'm still interviewing. I'm going into my 5th month. I'm sitting through at Kathy's office, who is the chairman and founder of Chick-fil-A. And he's probably about 60. Okay. Quite frankly, a very sweet man. And I looked at Truett and I said, Truett, this whole process is, you guys have been incredibly thorough, generous with your time, but I'm doing it myself. Okay. I actually have a job I still enjoy. What are you looking for in the ideal marketing candidate? Am I the guy? And he looked at me with a cold stare and he says, I have no idea. All I know is I don't want to do it. Long pause. And then he says, however, if we invite you to come here, it's because we know that we can trust you and we can have fun together. I'm more interested in who you are. He says, because if we ask you to come here, my intent is you're never going to go anywhere else. Okay, there's the second bomb. I've already had 4 jobs in an 8-year career. And then he closes with this. He said, this is the most important decision we make around here is who we invite into the organization. Because we don't train culture here, we hire it. We try to attract people to the business that already have a predisposed alignment with the values and the principles of the business. I'm trusting Jimmy and others to figure out whether you can do the work, the skill set. I'm more concerned about 30 years from now, are we going to still like each other and enjoy working together? And 2 weeks later, they offered me the job, and I joined them in January of 1981.
I want to pause on that for a second because there's so much gold within those last couple of minutes of what you talked about. And I think that's kind of a hot topic now where folks are this big debaters, hire for culture, train for skill. And obviously that applies to certain roles, certain jobs. And it also assumes you're coming to the table with experience and skill set, right? I wouldn't apply that to my doctor. Be like, my doctor is awesome. He's really fun to hang out with, but I don't know about his skills, right? Like, let's call it what it is.
Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
So that process took a while because they really wanted to understand who you are and your values. Do you remember any of the questions or those conversations that they, because values, well, we'll get into the whole faith conversation about Chick-fil-A and why it's so important. How did those conversations work? So that, was it the rapport? Was it, what was it that they were able to assess your values?
First of all, they had me probably spend time with over 20 different leaders in the business. Now, they've only got a staff of about 35 at the time, and I probably spent time with about 20 of them. I spent time with some actual...
Talk about it, long interview process.
Yes. So, and I spent time with a couple of Chick-fil-A restaurant operators. So part of what happens when you spend time with that many people, you start to get a sense of the kind of people that are in this business. To your point about what kind of questions they ask, I can assure you they didn't do anything that was illegal. They asked me questions about how do I like to spend my free time? What do I like to read? What do you and your wife like to do when you travel? Tell me about some of your experiences at TI and Six Flags that really helped shape your career, frame the way you look at marketing. How did you go about recruiting, selecting, and developing the talent you had at Six Flags? Because I noticed you got a staff of about 50 people. Okay. So, I mean, they're not going around the edges. They're going into relevant conversations, but they're really trying to get a handle on what's important to me. And when we get down to it, Adam, you can simplify what's important to people basically by looking at 2 things, their calendar and their checkbook. And in a roundabout way, they're trying to get a handle on, okay, how's this guy spend his time and his money? How's he treat his wife? How's he talk about his children? What's his aspirations for his career, etc. And they had a very thorough process. They still do process. In fact, Dan Cathy, who's Truett's oldest son, says that it's probably easier to get into the Marines than it is to get into Chick-fil-A. But they're still committed. The most important decision they make is who they invite into the family, into the Chick-fil-A family.
Tremendous insight right there, especially in this world where there's so much feedback from candidates on why is the process taking so long and why do I have to meet so many people? And I always flip it back too and say there's a due diligence on the candidate side as well to really see if this is going to be the right place for them. Well, don't rush it. Don't undersell it, right?
Yes. Let me add one more thing to this.
Please.
I gave a speech last week and I got a question in the same arena. And I made the point. I said, look, first of all, a job is great, but it's better to create a job. But then it's even better if you can create opportunities for people that lead to a career. But then it's even better than that. It's if you can create jobs and careers that actually become somebody's calling. Now, when I decided to go to Chick-fil-A, I don't know that I saw it as a calling, but after I was there a while, I was part of the process of writing the corporate purpose. I understood Truett better. I understood what we wanted to do in the marketplace in terms of serving customers. It became, for me, and I think for a lot of people, Chick-fil-A became a calling. Now, what do I mean by that? The career became a platform to do more than just my job. It became a platform to serve my family, to serve other people, to serve the community. To serve the church, to serve other ministries that we cared about or other organizations in Atlanta. The Chick-fil-A name and brand carried weight that gave us a platform and gives virtually anybody at Chick-fil-A a platform to serve, not only in the business, but outside of the business. So that's what I mean by the whole point of creating a calling for people.
I love it. So we spoke about the culture. Let's talk about the brand for a little bit. And I want to talk about that painting behind you, the origin of it coming from the Richards Group. I'd love if you could share that story of where that came from.
Sure. Well, for the first 5 or 6 years I was at Chick-fil-A, we were only in the mall business. You need to remember that. We only had stores in malls. It wasn't until 1986 we built our first store out on the street in Atlanta. So from a marketing perspective, for the first 6 years or so, we're focused on how do we maximize the mall as a medium. In other words, we have a captive audience. How do we market in the context of a captive audience environment? Now on the street, we have to give people compelling reasons to go buy McDonald's or Burger King or anyone else to come to Chick-fil-A. And we knew from research that even in Atlanta, less than 6% of people in Atlanta had unaided awareness of Chick-fil-A.
Didn't know who you were.
We had less than 20% trial in the market. So now we're going to put a store on the street, and now we're marketing a destination. Well, what is the upshot of that? The upshot of that is you got to create a story, a compelling story around the brand of Chick-fil-A. Why do you want to come here versus someplace else? So we had to start the process of building a marketing support system to build the brand and support operators to drive traffic to the restaurants. And we chose to do it in a way that wasn't chasing transactions because of the coupon experience. We weren't going to do it by discounting or couponing. We were going to do it through unconventional marketing ways. We used free food. We used Be Our Guest cards. We catered food at events free. We served the public community organizations with free food for meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So we built ground level awareness that we were there, but it was through the experience of having Chick-fil-A food and interacting with the talent that worked in those stores and in the restaurants. Okay, so by the mid-90s, we have over 500 freestanders open by then. Roughly 10 years, we're up to over 500 freestanders. Most of them are in the southern southeast belt, 9 states. We'd already reached the consensus that we were focused our marketing support on equipping the operators to build the business. They were going to be the primary marketing agents of the business. And I discussed this in the book.
Interesting.
Like a pyramid, we built the marketing programs and funding from the restaurants up, not from the home office down. So the upshot of that is we had spent over 10 years equipping operators how to build the brand and create awareness
in the community,
at the store level and in the community. Okay. So by the mid-90s, we've got enough restaurants now. There are certain things operators can't do for themselves, which at the top of the pyramid, we just named
the awareness. Right. Correct. The overall brand awareness.
Build brand awareness, and we labeled it national. Okay. What can we do that only we can do? A lot of things, menu innovation, later down the road, hospitality innovation, store design, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one of them is, how are we going to use media? Because we're now at a point we need umbrella coverage,
some air cover
for these guys. We do an agency search. We picked the Richards Group out of Dallas after a very thorough process. 2 of my guys led it.
Can only imagine.
I didn't get involved in it until they said, we recommend the Richards Group. The 3 of us go to the Richards Group. We hire them. Stan Richards made a commitment to us. It was a private company, culturally very similar.
Founder and Chief Creative Officer of the Richards Group, for anyone
Chief Creative Officer.
Paying attention.
And he made a promise to us, said, you're not going to see any creative that I have not personally approved. Yeah.
Okay. I heard that before.
And we told them, look, we're not going to be your biggest client. All right? We don't have that money to spend on media. But what we are willing to do is pay for great creative. We want creative that's got to bust out of the pack, because basically everybody in the fast food business, they all look the same. They show food and product and change logos, and it could
be a king or a clown.
Yeah, it could be anybody. So we hire them. And as the major media platform, the only one we could afford, we went to billboards, and we went to 3D billboards. And we experimented with 2 or 3 creative concepts that were a big hit in Dallas. Rubber chicken up on the billboard, and the headline was, if it's not Chick-fil-A, it's a joke. Big rubber chicken. I had another one in Atlanta. We opened our first double drive-through. We bought a board right by the store, and we got 2 3D board cars coming through the board. Chick-fil-A drive-through here. Real simple.
How did they find rubber chickens that big? I can't imagine that process.
They were actually fiberglass. It was actually fiberglass. Yeah. Anyway, so they're starting to hit some home runs with their creative force. And about 9 months into our relationship, they send us 6 new board concepts, because basically that's all we're doing. One of them is this thing behind me. Pencil drawing, eat more chicken, 2 cows. It's laying on my desk. When I see it, I absolutely go nuts laughing. We run it in Atlanta. It's at the same time we're about to enter our first sponsorship agreement with Peach Bowl, become the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. We need creative. This might be the answer. The board in Atlanta went up 1 month before the Summer Olympics. The buzz the brand got during the summer of that 96 was unbelievable. We said, let's put this same board up, exactly the same board in our top 20 markets. We'll pay for it. We'll tell the operators, we're putting it up. We're going to pay for it for 3 months. If you like it, then you can keep it up. You pay for it.
You continue. Yep.
Well, they did. It was a huge hit. We even had two of the cows, fiberglass cows, stolen off a board in Chattanooga, and we got all kinds of CNN and AP wire service coverage. We knew we had a winner. We went back to them and said, look, we think you got an idea that's bigger than a billboard. Would you flush this out where the cows are our brand, our bovine spokespeople? They're the ambassadors for the brand. It's funny. It breaks through the clutter. It's taking a pot shot at the burger guys without being offensive. We love it. What's it look like in other media
it's in good
platforms,
taste.
In the store, everything. They did that, and 3 months later, they showed us stuff we absolutely loved. And so the short of that story is I got to work with them for 22 years on keeping that campaign fresh, funny, relevant.
Yeah, that's a good client.
Yeah.
That's a good client right there.
Well,
and just kind of on the flip side of that, curious, because I'm in a service-based business too. What did they do well as far as managing that relationship? with you and
Great
Chick-fil-A
question,
well?
man. One of the things Stan did, was every time they worked on new creative for us in a 4-month cycle. So we were committed to keeping the creative fresh. So we'd see fresh campaign ideas every 4 months. We'd come to their office, and every time he would assign 6 creative teams, art director and writer, 6 teams to work on the next campaign idea. May the best team win. And we would only see the stuff Stan loved. And so first of all, we had a lot of creative options to look at, none of which he didn't like. But one of the unique things about them was if we didn't see anything we liked, and by the way, the test was pretty simple. If we didn't laugh, we didn't like it. If we didn't see anything we liked, we'd tell Stan, we just don't think you're hitting it. No argument, no pushback, no attempt to sell us on something, which I'd been through with other agents. Oh, you're not getting it. This or that. Said, no problem. We'll go back. We'll do it over. And now that didn't happen very often, but it did happen 2 or 3 times in my total career time with them. And they understood our priority was great creative. They understood it had to fit the brand. It had to fit the MOVE manifesto, which was the strategic platform for the campaign. And if we didn't think it did all that, no problem. And the service team, the account team on the business, went with us to we have focus groups. They're there. We go out and have major regional or national meetings with operators. They're there. So they embedded themselves in the business. They listened to customers. They listened to the operators. So when they came to us with great creative, it was almost always on strategy. And it was unique.
Because they understood the business and they listened and watched before.
Yes.
They didn't create based on their preconceived notions of what they thought the consumer would want. They actually went out and watched and listened and observed. That's incredible.
And they understood that we and they together had stumbled onto an idea that was an iconic idea, and they wanted to be a good steward of it.
Fascinating. Let's shift gears for a moment. I want to talk about what it means, biblical culture. And up here on the Northeast, it was one of those things when the Chick-fil-A started coming up here, it took us a hot minute to be like, wait a minute, it's closed on Sunday. And to wrap our heads around it was interesting, right? Yeah. And it's also an amazing concept that a brand could do so well being open 6 out of 7 days a week because of that commitment to the faith. Yeah. I love if you could share with the audience the ethos and the thought behind having a biblical corporate culture, and maybe some of the challenges that you had when you start to expand outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, to understand that, you've got to go all the way back to the founder. Truett Cathy was a believer. He was a professed Christ follower, or was he on a soapbox talking about it? No, he believed in living out his faith. He believed in earning the right to be asked, why are you different? Now, Closed Sunday was probably one of the most overt things he did. And that happened because he and his brother started his first restaurant in South Atlanta called the Dwarf House. It was a diner. It was small, thus the name. And literally after the first 6 days of operation, Saturday night, they looked at each other and said, Truett said, I don't want to work tomorrow. And his brother Ben said, I don't either. And Truett said, well, you know what? I don't want to ask our people to work if we're not willing to work. Let's close. And Truett would often say when he gave speeches that they decided that if they couldn't make a good living in 6 days, then they were on the wrong business.
Love it, man.
Which is completely logical. And secondly, they learned very quickly that having a day when it was completely shut down was, whether people chose to worship or not, it was good for the health of the business. It was good for the health and social well-being of the team members, the employees. And over time, he also learned it actually helped him attract better people. And I mean by that, it helped him.
Goes back to values.
Yeah. It implicitly attracted people that had similar values. Exactly. So being closed on Sunday was never an issue. Still is not an issue. Non-negotiable. I think last year, their average store volume was about $8 million. So he was right. They're doing okay in 6 days.
Yeah, we can make it work.
In terms of how that plays out in the culture, it is a inclusive, open culture. There's no discrimination, but people understand, hey, this is what this business stands for. I mean, the corporate purpose is very clear: to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us and have a positive influence on all that come in contact with Chick-fil-A. Okay, if you don't like a corporate purpose, you're probably not going to interview. Okay.
No.
So that's right up front. So people understand the kind of environment they're walking into. They understand the kind of man they're coming to work for in the case of Truett. But what ways that plays out, I don't want to over spiritualize this, but over time I realized a lot of Truett's behaviors and values in the business mirrored what Christ taught at the Sermon on the Mount. Treated people with respect, showed people mercy, patience, understanding, value, dignity, respect, and
Powerful.
he helpful, supportive. I want you to have a career, and as I said earlier, I want you to have a job where it actually becomes a calling, and you feel led to be here, and you don't want to leave. So, what happens if you have clarity about your culture? Let me get to the real benefit of it. If you have clarity about your culture, and what I mean by that is the purpose, why you exist, which I just quoted, the key values that are important to the man, the leader, things like teamwork, stewardship, integrity, fun, excellence. Those were the top 5. What happens if those are very, very clear and they see leaders living those things out? Well, what happens is people become empowered to make more decisions on their own. They know what's important. They know what's in bounds and what's out of bounds. They become implicitly better recruiters and vetters of potential talents when they're interviewing potential people. And what happened over time, one of the benefits that I noticed at Chick-fil-A was, and I experienced it was an incredibly innovative environment because people understood, why do we exist? What's really important? Customers king. We want to treat people with honor, dignity, and respect. Now, how do we do that? How do we bring that alive in the business, not only at the home office, but more importantly, how do we bring that alive in the experience people have at the Chick-fil-A stores? Leads to things like second mile service, menu innovation, menu that is actually fresh food made in every restaurant every day, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just all those little things that start to add up that drive innovation and keeping the brand
Love
relevant.
this insight. Incredible insight, Steve. How hard was that decision to end your incredibly long, successful run at Chick-fil-A? I'm sure it was a decision that came over time after consulting with your family. Talk to us a little bit about that moment.
Well, it was difficult. Here, it was the intersection of what am I going to do long term, and was Dan Cathy, who succeeded his father as the chairman, want to do. And by the time I was approaching 65, and not only me, but several of our executive leadership team members,
it's also a testament to the company and have people there for 30 years.
Oh,
Jeez.
yeah. Well, you just touched on the issue. The issue was we had a deep bench. I mean, I had 6 direct reports, at least 3 of them could have taken my job. Fully qualified, capable of taking my job.
They're ready to step up. It was time.
Ready to step up. Well, we got those kind of people all over the business. And so how long am I going to hang around that keeps somebody else from having an opportunity to experience what I experienced? Same thing in finance, or the same thing in IT, or the same thing in supply chain. Mm-hmm. We got this all over the business. And it took over a year with Dan and our executive team sitting around the table saying, okay, what's in the best interest of the business? How do we balance that with what do you guys want to do? And so the short of it was, we agreed that when we hit our 65th birthday year, at the end of that year, we would leave. Now, did I want to leave? No. I was having a lot of fun. Brain had never been hotter. The campaign's rolling. Our rolling college football's rolling. The menu is
Good times.
Good times. But what is a better time to leave than that?
Go out on top.
No muddy footprints.
I wish Tom Brady got that message, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not leaving a mess for my successor. The brain has momentum.
You set them up for success.
Correct. So then what Dan did, to his credit, was ask 2 or 3 of us to stay on the board, because he had formed not just an advisory board, but it evolved. It became a fiduciary board. So I served 3 more years on the board. So I still had interaction with leaders. I still had mentoring roles with key leaders. Quite frankly, I didn't have to spend any much mentoring time with my successor, because he'd already been on my leadership team for over a decade. He knew what we were doing. He knew why we were doing it.
He knew the playbook.
And so then,
that's tremendous.
After 38 years, you had it all up, including the board. I decided I'm going to walk away. I wrote my book in 2019. COVID kind of slowed. Yeah, thank you very much. Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A. COVID kind of slowed my media tour. But the book's done amazingly well, still selling well, and I still do speaking and a little consulting, and so I'm still having fun, but in a fresh arena.
I love it.
The favorite part of what I do now is interacting with the next generation of entrepreneurs.
Tremendous. And what's that spotlight? What's that warm what's that warm feeling inside from all these conversations? If you were going to sum it up, that thing that gives you the optimism and the hope about the young entrepreneurs out there, Steve?
Well, I think the optimism is that there's a lot of them out there, a lot of men and women who actually want to create jobs and not just have a job, who want an environment where they can serve other people and create an environment for other people to thrive, which is what Truett did with Chick-fil-A. And so I get a kick out of hanging around men and women who, in a large sense, still kind of think and have aspirations the same as he did, and same as my dad did. And I'm in a position to say, okay, now do you want a brand, a business that's just going to chase transactions and money, or do you want a business that's going to focus on building relationships, creating relational value, emotional connection with people, and therefore your brand is worth more, people recommend it more, and they use it more often. And a lot of them, that's what they want. But that is much harder than a business that's just chasing transactions.
Right. Of course, it takes more real work. It takes real work.
Real thinking.
Relationships are real work.
Real work. Yep.
I love it. And I got to ask you this. You know, when I think about your story and your career, the words loyalty, values, and principles come to mind. What do you want your legacy to be when your time has come?
Well, now, this is an odd answer, Adam, but I don't care about my legacy. I think the bigger issue is how did I represent Christ? How did I represent Truett and the Chick-fil-A purpose? Did I live that out? So if I have any legacy, I really mean this. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the men and women that I got to associate with and work with. And what kind of life are they having? What kind of career are they having? What kind of impact are they having? That's what I'm more interested in. And
let's bring it home here.
That includes my own children and grandchildren.
Love it.
Yeah.
What a tremendous conversation this has been. I want to bring it home here. This episode specifically has been a masterclass. This book.
You're very kind.
This book is a masterclass right here. I want everyone to check this book out. We'll link it up in the comments too. Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A, How Faith, Cows, and Chicken Built an Iconic Brand. 30, 40, 50 years of lessons within here. But let me ask you this, Steve. What is the single greatest piece of advice you've ever received that you take action on daily? Could be a mantra, something you wake up with, something you repeat.
That's easy. Something that I used to be really, really bad at. I used to be a very bad listener. I had to interject my opinion and my recommendations early in any conversation. Best advice I ever got was shut up, and the longer you're quiet, the smarter you're going to get. And I learned it's absolutely true. I intentionally developed a habit in meetings with my team, out on the road with operators. Listen hard, listen slowly, listen patiently, and try to be the last person that says anything. And what I discovered is the longer I stayed quiet, as I just said, the smarter I got. So I think the best advice I ever got was just learn to listen well. And you'll be a better leader, you'll make better decisions, etc.
Sage advice for everyone out there. And Steve, last but not least, you look back on your incredible life, career, for those that you've empowered, for those that you have helped build, gratitude for your family,
yes,
your faith, your relationships. What keeps you focused? What is your beacon? Steve Robinson, what is your North Star in life?
It's really no different than what I've tried to do up to this point, and that is to live out what I think the Bible teaches, particularly what Christ taught himself about how to live and how to represent him and how to interact with other people. I mean, I think if I had people ask me all the time, if you had to recommend one book, what book would you recommend? And I have several I'd recommend, but it's always the Bible first. And I
go back to Old Faithful.
Yes, and I think there's certain chapters in the Bible that are incredibly management leadership focused. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, portions of the Psalms, several of Peter's letters, particularly his letters to Timothy, all about mentoring and developing Timothy as a leader. And then at the top of the list, Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 from Christ. I mean, he describes there the behaviors he desires to see in his followers. So to answer your question, I'm working hard to try to be someone that aligns with what he asks his followers to be in Matthew chapter 5. Now, do I do it all the time? No. Sometimes on the golf course, I don't behave. But I think my North Star is, as a believer, someone incredibly thankful for the gift of salvation through his Son, through the wisdom through his Word. I just try to live what I've learned from others, but principally from the Word of God. And I thank you for asking that question.
Tremendous. And I thank you so much for joining us for the past hour. This has been incredible. I want everyone to find out more about Steve Robinson at srobinson.consulting.com. We'll link it up in the comments. As long as check out the book, we will link it up. This is a must read for anyone out there. Steve, thank you so much for joining me. And everyone out there, if this episode resonated with you, sharing means caring, goes a long way. You can leave a review rating. I really appreciate it. You can find out more at thepodcast.com. Follow us on all the social media channels. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.